Right, welcome, and thank you for coming. Thank you for enduring any sort of numbums that you might have from sitting through all of the talks today as well. As I've been introduced, I'm Stuart Shaw. I'm the head of search and strategy at Apple Media, and I've invited you here today to talk to you about voice in a presentation I've titled "A Study in Speech: The Voice Assistant Investigation." Now, whilst I was preparing for today, I did the old tried and tested technique of talking in front of the mirror, practicing in front of friends and family, but I needed a little bit more feedback. So I tried it in front of my wife, and she said to me, "Oh, it's really good, just don't try to be too witty or too professional or too intelligent, and instead just be yourself." I get that. So what's this about? Well, broadly, this talk is about voice search, its growth, and how to potentially benefit from its use, both for you, the companies that you work for, and with. Just by show of hands, who here has used voice ever before? 8%, cool. And who here has used it this week? And who here has used it today? Yeah, not a massive amount, but certainly more than if we'd have asked this question to the same audience a year ago, or potentially 2 years ago. Has anyone actually used voice to make a purchase? Hands up again. Well, that agrees with me. That's no hands, pretty much, yeah. So, in this talk, we're going to be covering off the importance of voice, how to research it, optimising for it, and a few threats to effort. But before we kick off, I thought it would be really useful if we just had a little bit of a story. There's a little bit of a competition towards the end as well, so pay attention. So, voice for me is really, really important. It's also really important for me because my son has high-functioning autism. Now, he's no Rain Man, and actually he's lost me a shit ton of money playing blackjack. They didn't let me take him into the casino. But all it just means is that I have to be really careful about the words and the language and the tone that I use around him. For me and my wife, it's just provided us with a really, really good understanding of language and a really, really sound appreciation for it as well. Anyway, he came to me and he asked me a simple question. "Daddy, can I have some grapes?" I know, it's a thrilling story, great opening gambit, and I just said to him, "You can if you want to." Now bear that in mind as we go through this. I'm going to ask you a question towards the end of it. If you get it right, I've got a Google Home giveaway and some t-shirts that I've been scrounging from some of the other exhibitors as well. So, a little bit about me. I started off my digital life in digital design before moving into customer services, marketing, a brief detour into the police and armed forces, and then spent the rest of my life in e-commerce and settled in for a rather turbulent ride as a dedicated SEO. I'm lucky enough to work at Apple Media, a 9-year-old company, around 50 employees with a real pedigree in content marketing. We're part of the IPG Media Brands Network, and also we operate both in the UK and internationally. But that's enough icebreakers, chit-chat, and introductions. We'll get started. So search really has come full circle, for me anyway. I'm old or young enough, depending on how you look at it, to actually remember those first commercially available computers and how we used to use them. We started off by searching in full sentences, really frustrated that they didn't understand what we meant. Over time, we adapted to starting to search in keyword-based commands, aimed at sculpting the results to provide us exactly with the right results that we wanted. But now, we're moving back towards natural search, back towards longer tail searches as well, with intent matching being seen much more frequently and being handled by the search engines themselves instead of needing to be a consideration for the searcher. Voice has naturally changed a lot too, right back from 2011 and 2013. So we've got sorts of Siri, Cortana, obviously Amazon and the Alexa, Google Assistant, and much more recently we've obviously got car manufacturers and smart devices being found in sort of fridges and microwaves and all sorts of wacky stuff throughout the home. We'll touch on that a little bit later on, but I suppose it's just interesting to see how this has kind of evolved. Now, I'd be surprised if more than 10% of the room hadn't seen this statistic at any point. And I think it is fair to say that voice has been completely overblown, at least up to now. But there is this data kicking around that by 2020-ish, around 50% of searches will be made with voice. And for me, the likelihood is that a lot of those searches are going to be informational and not necessarily commercial, but they're still valuable. Some other growth statistics that are probably quite interesting to know. So around teens, they use voice on a daily basis around 55% of the time, and young adults around 41% of the time. In the UK at the moment, there are 24,000 registered Alexa skills. Most of them are shit, but there's lots of them. And also, just something to be kind of aware of, I guess, in the January sales report that comes out the back of Christmas, is that last Christmas there were 16 million registered purchases of smart speakers as Christmas presents. So it's definitely growing. It's definitely, obviously, a big revenue stream from an e-com point of view, but also in terms of how people are using it, that's certainly changing too. So we found at Zazzle and at IPG that the results from this were so interesting that we were going to go off and do a little bit of investigation of our own. We questioned quite a vast array of people. Typically, they over-index around kind of the 25 to 35 age bracket, as expected. 80% of those owned a device. The main reasons that they didn't own a device for the remaining 20%, they were worried about their privacy, that they'd never get around to using it. Some thought it would be an unnecessary extravagance, and others were just being a bit stingy and waiting for a sale. 65% of those started their voice search journey in 2017 and 2018. The remaining participants kind of tailed off as we looked back throughout the years, with a small spike back in 2013 due to the widespread use of Siri at the time. 75% of those people found that it was relatively effective and reliable. Only a kind of scant handful of users found that the devices rarely ever worked or never worked at all. Interestingly, the devices were used in the bedroom, in the living room, in the kitchen, and in cars and vehicles. Now, obviously, as somebody who's attended collisions that occur due to people being distracted in their vehicles, I was a little bit concerned about that 40% in the car. But actually, is a mobile voice assistant any more distracting than a child, or a backseat driver, or my wife? That's one. So all of this data is free, and it's downloadable from the Zazzle site, I think, as of Monday, or very early next week. So have a look at it, and make sure you use as much of it as possible before you kind of try to formulate that killer strategy for 2019. It's data, there is no knowledge that it's not power, so have a crack at it. But how does voice, or how has voice affected search? Well, a lot of the talks that I've been to today have all said Google this, Google that, Google the other. But actually, it's not just Google, is it? If we really think about it, Alexa is powered, by Bing and by itself. So it would be the cheer when you press Microsoft, wouldn't it? But we all refer to Google, and collectively we mean search. And it's really important to remember that we shouldn't just be held to exactly what one company does or doesn't decide to do. Both Bing and Google are fast becoming answer engines instead of search engines. Featured snippets are everywhere, and they've changed the way that we search for and market our products, reducing organic click rate, or organic clicks in general, by around 37%. And that's really difficult. How can you measure, the influence that this would have, aside from we've achieved it, especially if people aren't actually clicking on it? So where does this leave us? Well, search professionals, we're addicted to click-through rate models. We're vying for traffic against PPC. We've climbed too far and too high to turn back now. And so often with marketing, we just need to start with some segmented analysis, aiming to understand the how and the why. So, why is voice important? Well, conversation is the most natural way for consumers to engage with your products. Voice releases that friction of traditional tech interaction and removes that barrier of use. And also, users are free to interact with your products and services in a much more intimate way. It also provides quite a slightly more measurable benefit in terms of the clicks that you may receive from a featured snippet. Why is it so damn popular, or apparently popular anyway? Well, technology, accessibility, the industry innovation, the marketing that goes into that industry innovation, ease of use, integration and speed of use are all contributing factors, especially when we consider that voice is around 130 words per minute, or with my nerves at the moment, 430 words per minute, and typing is at around 40 words per minute, so far less efficient. We're using voice primarily to ask questions right now, to listen to tunes and music, to ask about the weather, news and sports. We also use it as a bit of a glorified PA to set alarms and calendar invites. You can see that purchasing products is actually at the bottom of this list right now. Specifically in retail, we actually use it to research products a lot more than we do to make a purchase. Adding things to shopping lists, tracking packages. They're the real kind of area of voice, at least right now. And potentially that's for security reasons, but it may also just be a trust issue with technology. So I think that's quite an interesting way of assessing the how and the why, but we still need to drill down further. And for me, I've done that with looking at the type of voice. So you have the 4 C's, I have the 3 C's. Commands, conversations, and questions. CCQ doesn't sound as cool. So Greg, I hope you've got 2 C's in your speech. So got the whole stack. We'll focus on questions. So you have to be everything as marketeer. You have to be both the amateur and the expert. It's really important that you support your customers, your consumers and your users through their informational journey, because ultimately you'll be the first one that they think of when they start their commercial, their purchasing journey. Now, keyword research plays a massive part of it, and aside from obviously the great tools that you can see on screen, there are approximately 12 million more tools. I'm exaggerating. There are a lot of tools that do keyword research. But if you come away from today with one kind of free tool that I would suggest, then it would likely be Answer the Public, for setting up some really, really good informational kind of keywords that you would use for kind of seed terms. So bear that in mind. None of them are 100% comprehensive, but then I don't think any tool ever really is. I really wanted to be able to provide you guys something today that you could write down on a scrap of paper or jot down on your phone or your laptop, take into work with you on Monday and just slap your boss across the face with it. So I'm trying to focus, please don't do that. I'm trying to focus on things that are free and are accessible. So I very much hope that everyone with a website, a competent SEO agency or in-house party would have these. And we start with customer services, Google Search Console, and the search results themselves. So 1, customer services. Hello, how can I help you today? That is the epitome of Google search bar or Bing search bar in spoken form. It's an open door for users, passing through often with curses, but sometimes with questions. And obviously, if it's being asked and it's being said in a spoken conversation between humans, then there's a very good chance that it's also being searched for. So make sure that you take the time to sit down with your customer services department or your sales department to understand exactly the type of conversations that they're having, the questions that are being asked, because that's really, really valuable time with actual people. Not a lot of digital people would say that. They'd say, oh, use Ahrefs or use this tool or that tool. But actually, people. Let's start with people. Secondly, Google Search Console. So established brands who have dabbled in informational content will find this approach probably the most beneficial, especially when it's backed up with queries and filters from Google Data Studio. So Sam Marston from Geek Fraud, I think, is doing a talk later on this afternoon. So highly recommend checking that out. He'll go into a little bit more data, obviously, about filtering and making sure how it works. But if you do ever want to reach out and chat to me about this a bit more, you're more than welcome to. As a bit of an example, we can set up filters to exclude things like blank queries. We can find specific searches that were made on mobile, and we can also find queries that have got more than X number of words. Now, we're fortunate enough to work with RAC, who have a relatively large content hub that targets a lot of search terms, but they quite naturally acquire a lot of feature snippets as well through this. Now, some of these results are below from adding similar filters in. We've got things like, is it illegal to drive without shoes? Is it illegal to drive in flip-flops? Very similar terms. Now, there's 7 terms there. 6 of those provided voice results, and RAC either ranked within the top 3 or actually claimed the voice result itself. In the example that we can see here, we've got the question, is it illegal to drive barefoot? And they've said, here is the law in a nutshell. I'll read it out because I didn't actually know that. It is not illegal to drive in the UK without shoes. And the same applies for wearing flip-flops. There is a catch though. That's actually where the voice result ends. So really, really kind of clickbaity almost. You can get behind the wheel of a vehicle barefoot or while wearing flip-flops, provided you are able to operate the controls safely. Nice. And actually, the way that they've said that, answering in a nutshell, is a really, really good way of thinking about it. Because for paragraphs especially, you should try to be succinct. 40 to 55 words is typically the sweet spot. And lastly, we've got the search results page itself, especially when we can utilize the keywords everywhere plugin, extension, however you want to put it. It provides a really, really quick snapshot of being able to see some of the other words that are returned, related keywords, for example. And if you can get the people also ask box to trigger, then you can continuously expand that by clicking on it. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking, but isn't this just informational keyword research? Isn't it exactly the same process? And the short answer is yeah, it is. The long answer is yes, but there's a slight twist to it. And that twist comes in the form of the structure of your content. Headings and paragraphs is a really good start, so headings for questions and paragraphs for the responses. We've got drop-downs, accordions, schema, anchor links within the content as well. All really, really good factors, all definitely worth considering. But not all snippets are the same. And it's not always just headers and paragraphs that are going to, really maximise your opportunity here. You can't simply log all of your keywords into a bucket and expect the same strategy to be able to be just as effective across all of them. Until videos are more prominently on the scene, we have three major options here. We've got paragraphs, lists, and tables. Understanding what works best and where is key to ranking that position 0 in that featured snippet. So Google likely has a preference, that's the thing. So do your best to find it. Lists can completely dominate some of the queries as well. If we look at this top section here, then for all keywords, creating a paragraph in response to a question is a relatively safe bet, around 80% saturation. But for the best and the how-to terms, you can see that lists are a massive, massive win. Especially for best, where it's around 80% saturation for lists. So, threats to effort. Always worth considering. There's nothing worse than pouring energy into something only for an apex website to completely dominate all of your efforts. So before you really start on your voice exploration or any of your keyword research, it's worth finding out if any of the large apex sites, at least these in the UK, I'm sure they're different in different countries, see if they are heavily occupying or targeting your category and your products and services. Apps are naturally also a concern as well, as if we didn't have enough to contend with. There's a potential that they may have some preferential treatment depending on the operating system, but I think it's fair to say that an app, at least outside of the niche, is likely not to have the same level of data as potentially Google and Bing both have. When voice reared its ugly head, I had a few gaps in my knowledge. I'm not afraid to admit it at all. As you can see, I've had a relatively colourful background in terms of my history, both kind of in and out of the police service. But so I thought I'd put together a few kind of proactive answers that may be kind of helping you with any of the questions that you have buzzing around your head. Firstly, does speed help? Well, yes, it does. Everyone likes a fast site, and actually, voice loves sites that load quickly. In some research performed, we found that the time to first byte of a voice result is typically 4 times faster than that of the average web page. Common one that I also hear is, do I need a separate page for each wording of a question? I mean, we have to remember that this is cutting-edge technology. Alexa's not stupid. It can understand if you said specific and you meant specific. It gets that. I had to practice that a few times. I caught that one up. And actually, in a recent study, we found that only 1.7% of voice-triggered keywords actually had the exact keyword in the title tag itself. So it's not necessarily required. And lastly, do you need to rank first? Well, we've been chasing rankings for years, and a little box said isn't going to change that, nor is that speaker there. But it could help. Ranking in the top 5 will often increase your chances of being that chosen voice result. And if we look at snippets, 97% of snippets tend to occur thanks to sites that rank in the top 5. Now, obviously we've got talks either side of me here today, fantastic talks either side of me here today. So don't just take my word for it. A lot of people are talking about voice. There's lots of data out there for you guys to try to take in. Plenty of sites are talking about it, creating great articles and really, really useful guides. So before, like I say, you create any kind of killer strategy for 2019 or 20, You read and get as much of this information in as possible. Everyone's got contrasting opinions, but the only one that's really going to matter at the end of the day is yours. Now, what about the future? Where is it all heading? Well, conversations is probably where it's going to head next. Hopefully, we've all been able to see the video of an AI booking someone's hair appointment. I think that's kind of really fantastic knowledge of where it's all going to be heading. And obviously, Bernard, you've mentioned that that's certainly where a lot of people should be focusing on in terms of conversations and the importance of them. PPC. So sponsorship, really, really important as well. So there's a lot of traffic, effectively, that's going to be lost through voice results, not just for us as kind of organic rankings, but for paid as well. And this is Google and Bing's revenue stream. So there's going to be some level of sponsorship for voice at some point. I think we'd be relatively ignorant to suggest otherwise. And lastly, there's just going to be more data. Or this, or that, or everything. Answers for everything is beginning to become much more refined. And potentially you may end up needing an individual page to ask an individual question, but right now it's not the case. Interestingly as well, Amazon, I don't know if anyone's aware, but they've got around 5,000 people that are currently working on voice and Alexa. So yeah, that's a pretty chunky amount of people. So what's next? Well, the interesting point on this graph for me was right at the end. Cars. I think for kind of technoholics and people that like the nearest gadget, voice is definitely a really nice thing from kind of an accessibility point of view, but it's going to become an inescapability. And soon, no matter where you happen to be, there's something that's going to be listening. Oh yeah, great. So, my son, and just to remind you, this is for a bit of a competition, so a t-shirt giveaway, and because I'm not impartial, because I can spot a few faces that I know or like, dislike, in the crowd, I think it's only fair that Jen, you pick up the winner of this, so it's hands up when you hear the question with the right answer, please, and pre-Google me. So, my son comes to me and he says, Daddy, can I have some grapes? And I say to him, you can if you want to. And off he scuttles, and he comes back. How many grapes does he come back with?
The gentleman all the way from back to the person.
Yeah, I thought so, sorry.
Thank you.
Is that two?
Yeah.
Spot on, yeah. I said to him, you can if you want to. Okay, more grapes for me though. Great. Like I knew. Awesome. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the next